The old port town of Bari, on Italy's Adriatic coast, was bustling. It was December 2, 1943. The British had taken Puglia's capital in September, and though the front now lay just 150 miles to the north, the medieval city, with its massive cliffs cradling the sea, had escaped the fighting almost unscathed. Only a few miles outside of town, lines of women and children begged for black market food, but here shop windows were full of fruit, cakes and bread. Young couples strolled arm in arm. Even ice cream vendors were doing a brisk trade. Bari was a Mediterranean service hub, supplying the 500,000 Allied troops engaged in driving the Germans out of Italy. Grand waterfront buildings were recently designated the headquarters of the United States 15th Air Force. The liberating Tommies had already chased the Nazis from the skies over Italy, and the British, who controlled the port, were so confident they had won the air war that Air Marshal Sir Arthur Coningham announced that Bari was all but immune from attack. "I would regard it as a personal affront and insult if the Luftwaffe should attempt any significant action in this area," he said that day at a press conference. 4 days earlier, the American Liberty ship John Harvey had pulled in with a convoy of 9 other merchantmen, and some 30 Allied ships were crammed into the harbor, packed against the seawall and along the pier. Their holds were laden with everything from food and medical gear to engines, corrugated steel for landing strips, and 50-gallon drums of aviation fuel. Visible on the upper decks were tanks, armored personnel carriers, jeeps and ambulances. Bright lights winked atop huge cranes that hoisted baled equipment up and out. At 7:35 p.m., a blinding flash followed by a terrific bang. The ancient port's single anti-aircraft battery opened fire. Then came an ear-splitting explosion, then another, and another. German Junkers Ju-88s flew in low over the town, dropping bombs short of the harbor. Smoke and flames rose from the city's winding streets. As incendiaries rained down on the harbor, turning night into day, gunners aboard the anchored ships scrambled to shoot down the enemy, too late. The attacking German airplanes fled into the night. The raid lasted less than 20 minutes. The Great Secret, the classified World War II disaster that launched the war on cancer. Let's know very painful story of British soldier after mustard gas bombing on Pearl Harbor.
On the night of December 2, 1943, the Germans bombed a key Allied port in Bari, Italy, sinking 17 ships and killing more than 1,000 American and British servicemen and hundreds of civilians. Caught in the surprise World War II air raid was the John Harvey, an American Liberty ship carrying a secret cargo of 2,000 mustard bombs to be used in retaliation if Hitler resorted to gas warfare. The Luftwaffe's Lucky Strike, which released a poisonous cloud of sulfur mustard vapor over the harbor, and liquid mustard into the water, prompted an Allied cover-up of the chemical weapons disaster. But it also led to an Army doctor's serendipitous discovery of a new treatment for cancer. In the devastating aftermath of the attack, which the press dubbed a Little Pearl Harbor, U.S. General Dwight D. Eisenhower and British Prime Minister Winston Churchill moved to conceal the truth about the shipment of poison gas, for fear Germany might use it as an excuse to launch an all-out chemical war. As a result of the military secrecy, medical personnel weren't alerted to the danger of contamination from the liquid mustard that spread insidiously over the harbor, mixing with the tons of fuel oil from the damaged ships. In the crush of casualties that first night, hundreds of survivors, who had jumped or been blown overboard and swam to safety, were mistakenly believed to be suffering from only shock and immersion. They were given morphine, wrapped in warm blankets and left to sit in their oil-soaked uniforms for as long as 12, and even 24 hours, while the seriously wounded were attended to first. It was tantamount to marinating in mustard gas. But all remained ignorant of the peril. By dawn, the patients had developed red, inflamed skin and blisters on their bodies, the size of balloons. Within 24 hours, the wards were full of men with eyes swollen shut. The doctors suspected some form of chemical irritant, but the patients did not present typical symptoms or respond to standard treatments. The staff's unease only deepened when notification came from headquarters that the hundreds of burn patients with unusual symptomology would be classified dermatitis N.Y.D., not yet diagnosed. Then without warning, patients in relatively good condition began dying. These sudden, mysterious deaths left the doctors baffled and at a loss as to how to proceed. Rumors spread that the Germans had used an unknown poison gas. With the daily death toll rising, British officials in Bari placed a red light call alerting Allied Force Headquarters, AFHQ, in Algiers to the medical crisis. Lieutenant Colonel Stuart Francis Alexander, a young chemical warfare specialist attached to Eisenhower's staff, was dispatched immediately to the scene of the disaster. Despite the British port authorities' denials, Alexander quickly diagnosed mustard gas exposure. Convinced that preoccupation with military security had compounded the tragedy, he doggedly pursued his own investigation to identify the source of the chemical agent and determine how it had poisoned so many men. After carefully studying the medical charts, he plotted the destroyed cargo ship's positions relative to the gas victims and succeeded in pinpointing the John Harvey as the epicenter of the chemical explosion. When divers pulled up fragments of fractured gas shells, the casings were identified as being from 100-pound American mustard bombs. On December 11, 1943, Alexander informed headquarters of his initial findings. Not only was the gas from the Allies' own supply, but the victims labeled dermatitis NYD had suffered prolonged exposure as a result of being immersed in a toxic solution of mustard and oil floating on the surface of the harbor. The response Alexander received was shocking. While Eisenhower accepted his diagnosis, Churchill refused to acknowledge the presence of mustard gas in Bari. With the war in Europe entering a critical phase, the Allies agreed to impose a policy of strict censorship on the chemical disaster. All mention of mustard gas was stricken from the official record, and Alexander's diagnosis deleted from the medical charts. Alexander's final report of the Bari mustard casualties was immediately classified, but not before his startling discovery of the toxic effects on white blood cells caught the attention of his boss in the Chemical Warfare Service, CWS, Colonel Cornelius P. Dusty Rhodes. In civilian life, Rhodes served as head of New York's Memorial Hospital for the treatment of cancer and allied diseases. Of the more than 617 casualties who suffered from gas exposure at Bari, 83 died, all demonstrating mustard's suppressive effect on cell division, suggesting it might be used to inhibit the fast-multiplying malignant white cells that can invade and destroy healthy tissue. Alexander had extracted invaluable data from the morgue full of case studies, pointing to a chemical that could possibly be used as weapon in the fight against certain types of cancer. Based on Alexander's landmark Bari report, and a top-secret Yale University clinical trial that demonstrated that nitrogen mustard, a more stable cousin of sulfur mustard, could shrink tumors, Rhodes was convinced the harmful substance, in tiny, carefully calibrated doses, could be used to heal. In 1945, he persuaded the General Motors tycoons Alfred P. Sloan and Charles F. Kettering to fund the Sloan Kettering Institute for Cancer Research, SKI, to create a state-of-the-art laboratory, staffed by wartime scientists, to synthesize new mustard derivatives and develop the first medicine for cancer, known today as chemotherapy. In 1949, mustargen, mechlorethamine, became the first experimental chemotherapeutic drug approved by the FDA and was used successfully to treat non-Hodgkin's lymphoma. This triumph galvanized the search for other chemical agents that specifically targeted malignant cells but spared normal ones, leading the American Cancer Society to credit the Bari disaster with initiating the Age of Cancer chemotherapy. What was significance of the SS John Harvey's mustard gas disaster? WW2. The SS John Harvey mustard gas disaster, World War II, is significant because it secretly exposed the horrific effects of chemical weapons, influenced Allied policy, and advanced modern chemical warfare medicine. What happened? Brief context. In December 1943, during the German air raid on the Italian port of Bari, the U.S. Liberty ship SS John Harvey was sunk. Unknown to most people there, the ship was carrying mustard gas bombs, intended only for retaliation if Germany used chemical weapons. The explosion released mustard gas into the harbor, contaminating sailors, soldiers, civilians, and medical personnel. Why it was significant. 1. Revealed the reality of chemical weapons. Mustard gas caused severe burns, blindness, lung damage, and delayed deaths. Many victims showed symptoms doctors initially did not recognize, worsening casualties. It proved that chemical weapons were indiscriminate and devastating, even without intentional use. 2. Extreme secrecy and misdiagnosis. The US and Britain kept the incident secret to avoid revealing they possessed chemical weapons. Doctors were not told about the gas, so patients were treated incorrectly. This secrecy increased deaths and highlighted the danger of withholding medical information in war. 3. Reinforced restraint in chemical warfare. After Bari, Allied leaders became even more determined not to initiate chemical warfare. The disaster strengthened the understanding that once chemical weapons are used, control is impossible. Germany never used chemical weapons on the battlefield, and the Allies did not either. 4. Medical and scientific impact. Autopsies showed mustard gas destroyed white blood cells. This research later contributed to the development of chemotherapy drugs for cancer, notably nitrogen mustards. Thus, a wartime tragedy indirectly influenced modern cancer treatment.